The blizzard swept down from the mountains with a vengeance that February night in 1878, turning the New Mexico territory into a frozen wasteland that even the hardiest of souls struggled to survive. Garrett Zimmerman urged his horse forward through the driving snow, his ranch still 5 miles distant, when he spotted something dark against the white landscape that made his heart clench with an unfamiliar dread. At first, he thought it might be a wounded animal, perhaps a deer that had collapsed in the storm. But as he drew closer, dismounting from his gelding with careful steps through the knee-deep snow, he realized with a shock that it was a young woman. She lay curled on her side, her buckskin dress dusted white with snow, her long black hair spread around her like a dark halo against the pristine ground. Her lips had taken on a bluish tint, and she wasn't moving. "Lord have mercy," Garrett breathed, dropping to his knees beside her. He pressed 2 fingers against her throat, searching for a pulse. It was there, faint and thready but present. She was Apache, he could tell from her clothing and the traditional ornaments she wore, though most had been torn or lost. What in God's name was she doing out here alone in this weather? There was no time for questions. If he didn't get her somewhere warm immediately, she would die. Garrett gathered her into his arms, surprised at how light she felt, how young she appeared. She couldn't be more than 18 or 19 years old. He managed to hoist her onto his horse before climbing up behind her, cradling her against his chest as he urged the gelding toward home. The ride seemed to take forever. The wind howled around them like a living thing, trying to tear them from the saddle. Garrett held the girl tighter, willing his own body heat to keep her alive just a little longer. She didn't stir, didn't make a sound, and that terrified him more than he cared to admit. When his small ranch house finally came into view through the swirling snow, relief flooded through him. He'd built it himself 3 years ago when he decided to leave his past behind and start fresh in this harsh but beautiful land. It wasn't much, just 3 rooms and a barn for the horses, but it was solid and warm, and right now it represented salvation. Garrett half fell from his horse, still holding the unconscious girl, and kicked open his front door. The fire he'd banked that morning had died down to embers, but it was still warmer than outside. He laid her on his bed, then rushed to build up the fire, throwing on logs until flames crackled and roared. Once heat began to fill the room, he turned his attention back to the girl. Her buckskin dress was soaked through, and he knew he needed to get her out of the wet clothes or she'd never warm up. He hesitated, propriety warring with necessity, but survival won out. As quickly and respectfully as he could, he removed her wet dress and moccasins, averting his eyes as much as possible, and wrapped her in every blanket he owned. Her skin was like ice. Garrett chafed her hands between his own, trying to restore circulation. He heated water on the stove and carefully dripped some between her blue lips, relieved when her throat moved in an automatic swallow. It meant her body was still fighting. "Come on," he murmured. "Don't give up now. You didn't survive whatever brought you out there just to die in my bed." Hours passed. Garrett never left her side, continuously warming her hands and feet, adding logs to the fire until the room was almost stifling. Somewhere around midnight, her eyelids began to flutter. Her lips moved, forming words in Apache that he couldn't understand. "Easy now," he said softly. "You're safe. You're going to be all right." Her eyes opened fully then, dark and wide with confusion and fear. She tried to sit up, her gaze darting around the unfamiliar room before landing on him. He saw her take in his weathered face, his calloused hand still holding one of hers, the concern in his blue eyes. She spoke again in Apache, her voice hoarse and questioning. Garrett shook his head regretfully. "I don't understand. You speak English." The girl stared at him for a long moment, then slowly nodded. "Little," she whispered, the word barely audible. "What's your name?" Garrett asked gently. "Nascha," she said after a pause. "It means owl." "That's a pretty name. I'm Garrett Zimmerman. You were freezing to death out in the storm. I brought you here to warm up." He gestured around the room. "You're safe here. I promise I won't hurt you." Nasha's eyes filled with tears that spilled down her cheeks. She turned her face away from him, her whole body beginning to shake with silent sobs. Garrett felt helpless in the face of such raw grief. Whatever had brought her out into that blizzard, it had been something terrible. "It's all right," he said, though he knew it probably wasn't. "You don't have to talk about it now. Just rest and get warm." But Nascha shook her head, struggling to sit up despite her obvious weakness. "Raiders," she managed to say, her English stilted but understandable. "White men. They come to village, kill many. Take horses, food, I run, they chase. I hide in rocks, then walk, lost in snow." Garrett's jaw tightened with anger. He knew exactly the type of men she meant. Outlaws and raiders who saw the Apache as less than human, who thought nothing of massacring entire villages for whatever they could steal. It made him sick. "Your family?" he asked quietly. Fresh tears coursed down her face. "All gone. Mother, father, little brother, all dead. I'm sorry," Garrett said, and he meant it with every fiber of his being. "I'm so sorry, Nascha." She looked at him then, really looked at him, as if trying to understand why this white man would show her kindness when others of his race had shown her only cruelty. "Why you help me?" she asked. "Because it's the right thing to do," Garrett answered simply. "Because you needed help and I was there to give it. Because I couldn't live with myself if I'd just ridden past and left you to die." Nascha studied his face for a long moment, then nodded slowly, as if she'd found something there that satisfied her. She lay back down, exhaustion claiming her once more. Within minutes, she was asleep, this time a natural, healing sleep rather than the dangerous unconsciousness of before. Garrett sat back in his chair, running a hand through his dark hair. He just opened up a whole mess of complications for himself, he knew. Nascha couldn't stay here indefinitely without causing talk, and the nearest Apache reservation was over 100 miles away. But he couldn't bring himself to regret his decision to save her. Looking at her sleeping face, so young and vulnerable, he felt a fierce protectiveness rise up in him that took him by surprise. "Well, Garrett," he muttered to himself, "you've really done it this time." The storm raged for 3 more days. During that time, Nascha slowly regained her strength. Garrett gave her his bed and slept on the floor by the fire, though she protested weakly. He cooked simple meals of beans and cornbread, which she ate with quiet gratitude. They spoke little at first, the language barrier and the rawness of her grief making conversation difficult. On the 4th day, the sun finally broke through the clouds, revealing a world transformed by snow. Garrett stepped outside to check on his horses and found nearly 3 feet of accumulation. It would take weeks for all of it to melt. When he returned to the house, he found Nascha standing by the window, wrapped in one of his blankets, staring out at the white landscape. "Beautiful," she said softly, "but cold, like death." Garrett came to stand beside her. "Spring will come," he said. "It always does. The snow will melt, the grass will grow green again, and wildflowers will cover the hills. Life returns." Nascha turned to look at him, something shifting in her dark eyes. "You believe this? That life comes back after death?" "I have to believe it," Garrett said. "Otherwise, what's the point of going on?" She nodded slowly, turning back to the window. "My people believe the spirits of the dead watch over us, that they guide us to where we need to be." She paused, then added quietly, "Maybe they guide me to you." The words hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning that neither of them was quite ready to acknowledge. Garrett cleared his throat. I need to ride into town soon, get some supplies, figure out what to do next. What to do with me, you mean? Nascha said, and there was no accusation in her voice, only resignation. Nascha, I'm not going to abandon you, Garrett said firmly. You can stay here as long as you need to, but I won't lie to you. It's going to cause problems. People around here, they're not always understanding about these things. They hate Apache, Nascha said simply. I know this. I see their faces when my people come to trade, fear and hate. Not everyone, Garrett protested, though he knew she was mostly right. There are good people too. People who believe in treating others with respect, regardless of their heritage. Nascha looked at him with those wise, sad eyes. You are one of these good people. Garrett felt heat rise to his face. I'm just a man trying to do right, that's all. Over the next few weeks, as the snow gradually melted and the first hints of spring began to appear, an easy routine developed between them. Garrett taught Nascha more English, and she proved to be a quick learner, picking up new words and phrases with remarkable speed. In return, she taught him Apache words and told him stories of her people, of their customs and beliefs. She also proved to be incredibly capable. Once her strength fully returned, she insisted on helping around the ranch. She could cook better than Garrett ever had, turning his simple staples into flavorful meals. She helped tend the horses, mended his clothes, and kept the house cleaner than it had been since he'd built it. More than that, her presence filled a loneliness in Garrett's life that he hadn't even realized existed. He found himself looking forward to their evening conversations by the fire, when Nascha would share memories of her lost family, and he would tell her about his own past. He'd grown up in Missouri, he told her, on a small farm. His parents had died of fever when he was 16, and he'd drifted west, working as a ranch hand, a scout, even briefly as a lawman before deciding he wanted a quieter life. You were lonely too, Nascha observed one evening. Before you find me. Garrett considered denying it, then decided there was no point. Yes, he admitted. I was lonely. I didn't realize how much until you came along. Something passed between them in that moment, a recognition of their shared isolation, their mutual need for connection. Nascha reached out and placed her hand over his where it rested on his knee. Her touch was warm and gentle, and Garrett felt his heart rate quicken. I am glad the spirits guide me to you, she said softly. I'm glad too, Garrett replied, his voice rough with emotion. But the world outside their small sanctuary wouldn't leave them in peace forever. In late March, Garrett rode into the nearest town, San Angelo, to get supplies. It was a rough settlement, barely more than a collection of buildings clustered around a trading post, but it served the scattered ranchers and homesteaders in the area. He was loading sacks of flour and beans into his wagon when Sheriff Tom Mitchell approached him. Mitchell was a decent man, fair-minded for the most part, but he had a town to protect, and that meant keeping the peace. Garrett, Mitchell said by way of greeting. Heard you've got yourself a visitor out at your place. Garrett's hand stilled on the flour sack. News traveled fast, even out here. Where'd you hear that? Jake Patterson rode by your ranch last week. Said he saw an Apache girl through your window. Mitchell's expression was carefully neutral. That true? There was no point in lying. It is. I found her nearly frozen to death during that big storm in February. Saved her life. That was a good thing you did, Mitchell said. But, Garrett, you know how people are going to react. There's been tensions with the Apache for years. Some folks won't take kindly to you harboring one, especially a young woman. They'll talk. Let them talk, Garrett said, his voice harder than he intended. She's got nowhere else to go. Her whole family was killed by raiders. I'm not going to throw her out to fend for herself. Mitchell sighed. I'm not asking you to. I'm just warning you. Keep your head down, watch your back, and maybe consider taking her to the reservation before this becomes a bigger problem. The reservation is over 100 miles away, and from what I hear, conditions there aren't exactly comfortable," Garrett said. "She's safe and well-fed at my place. I'm not changing that." The sheriff studied him for a long moment. "You're getting attached to her, aren't you?" Garrett met his gaze steadily. "What if I am?" "Then you're heading for a world of trouble, my friend." Mitchell shook his head. "But I can see your mind's made up. Just be careful. There are men around here who wouldn't think twice about causing problems for you or for her." Garrett nodded, taking the warning seriously. "I appreciate you telling me straight." When he returned to the ranch that afternoon, he found Nascha working in the small garden plot behind the house, turning over the soil in preparation for spring planting. She'd tied her long black hair back with a strip of leather, and the sun had brought color to her cheeks. She looked healthy and vibrant, so different from the half-frozen girl he'd pulled from the snow. She looked up as he approached, and her face broke into a smile that made his chest feel tight. "You are back. I was beginning to worry." "Just took longer than I expected," Garrett said, returning her smile. "Had a conversation with the sheriff." Nasha's smile faded. "About me." "About us," Garrett corrected. "Seems word's gotten around that you're staying here. Mitchell warned me that some people might not like it." She set down the garden tool and stood, brushing dirt from her hands. "I should go. I bring trouble to you." "You're not going anywhere," Garrett said firmly. "This is your home now for as long as you want it to be." "But the townspeople can mind their own business," Garrett finished. "Nascha, I meant what I said. You're safe here. I won't let anyone hurt you." She studied his face, and he saw the moment she made her decision to trust him completely. "Then I stay. But I want to help more. Learn to shoot to protect myself and the ranch. I do not want to be burden." "You're not a burden," Garrett said gently. "But if you want to learn to shoot, I'll teach you." So began a new phase of their time together. Each morning, after the chores were done, Garrett would take Nascha out to a clearing and teach her to handle a rifle and a revolver. She was a natural, her hands steady, her eyes sharp. Within a few weeks, she could hit a target with impressive accuracy. "Where did you learn to shoot so well?" Garrett asked one day, genuinely impressed. "My father teach me when I am young," Nascha explained. "He say Apache women must be strong, must know how to protect themselves and their children." He was right. Her voice grew sad. Though it did not help him in the end, Garrett reached out and squeezed her shoulder. These moments of grief still came upon her suddenly, and all he could do was be there for her. "I'm sure he'd be proud of you, of how strong you've been." "You make me strong," Nascha said, looking up at him. "Your kindness, your protection, they give me reason to keep going." Their faces were close, and Garrett became acutely aware of the warmth of her shoulder beneath his hand, the way the sunlight caught in her dark eyes, the soft curve of her lips. He wanted to kiss her, wanted it with a fierce intensity that surprised him. But he held back, unsure if she felt the same way, unwilling to take advantage of her vulnerable position. Nascha seemed to sense his hesitation. She reached up and placed her hand over his, where it rested on her shoulder. "Garrett," she said softly, and the way she spoke his name made his heart race. "Nascha, he paused, struggling to find the right words. "I care about you, more than I should, probably, more than is wise given everything, but I do." "Why is it not wise to care?" she asked, her eyes searching his face. "Because people will talk. Because it could cause problems for both of us. Because I'm 10 years older than you and you've been through so much trauma. I don't want to take advantage of your situation." Nasha's expression grew serious. "You think I do not know my own mind? You think I am child who cannot choose for herself?" "No, that's not what I meant. I am woman," Nascha said firmly. "I have seen 20 winters. I know loss, I know grief, I know cruelty, but I also know kindness when I see it. I know good man when I meet one, and I know what I feel in my heart." She placed her free hand over her chest. "I care for you too, Garrett. You save my life, yes, but more than that. You give me hope. You make me feel safe. You make me laugh again." Garrett's resistance crumbled. He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs gently stroking her cheeks. "Are you sure?" In answer, Nascha rose on her toes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was sweet and tentative at first, then deepened as Garrett wrapped his arms around her and pulled her close. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "I am sure," Nascha whispered. From that day forward, their relationship changed. They were no longer just two lonely souls sharing a home, but something more, something deeper. Garrett found himself planning a future that included Nascha, imagining years stretching out before them, filled with quiet mornings and peaceful evenings, with hard work and simple joys. But he knew that they couldn't hide away on the ranch forever. Eventually, they would have to face the world and all its prejudices. That day came sooner than he expected. In early May, a group of men rode up to Garrett's ranch. He counted 5 of them, and he recognized most from town. They weren't wearing badges, which meant this wasn't an official visit. Garrett stepped out onto his porch, his hand resting casually on the revolver at his hip. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" he asked, his voice carefully neutral. The man in front, a rancher named Duke Harrington, spat tobacco juice into the dirt. "We're here about that Apache squaw you're keeping." Garrett felt his jaw tighten. "Her name is Nascha, and she's a guest in my home. What business is it of yours?" "It's our business when you're harboring savages," another man said. "We got families to protect, women and children. How do we know she's not spying for her people, planning an attack?" "That's ridiculous," Garrett said flatly. "Her entire family was killed by white raiders. She's no threat to anyone." "That's what you say," Harrington said, "but we only got your word on that. We think it's best if she moves along, goes to the reservation where she belongs." "This is my land," Garrett said, his voice hard as iron. "Nascha stays as long as she wants to stay. You don't have any say in the matter." One of the men in back reached for his rifle, but Harrington held up a hand, stopping him. "Now, let's not do anything hasty. We're just concerned citizens, Zimmerman. We're asking you nicely to reconsider." "And I'm telling you nicely that my answer is no," Garrett replied. "Now I suggest you all ride out of here before this gets ugly." Behind him, he heard the door open. Nascha stepped out onto the porch, and he saw several of the men's hands move toward their weapons. But Nascha wasn't armed. She simply stood beside Garrett, her chin held high, her dark eyes steady and unafraid. "This man saved my life," she said clearly, her English much improved from those first halting words months ago. "He show me kindness when I have nothing. He is good man, better than you who come here with threats and hate in your hearts." Harrington's face reddened. "You've got a mouth on you, girl." "She's right, though," Garrett said. "You came here looking for trouble. Well, you found it, but it's not going to go the way you think. I've got right on my side, and I've got the law on my side. Sheriff Mitchell knows Nascha's here, knows the whole story. You do anything to either of us, and you'll answer to him." It was a slight exaggeration of Mitchell's position, but the mention of the sheriff's name had the desired effect. The men shifted uncomfortably in their saddles. They'd been hoping to intimidate Garrett into compliance, but it wasn't working. "This isn't over," Harrington said finally. "You're making a mistake, Zimmerman." "The only mistake would be giving in to bullies," Garrett replied. "Now get off my land." The men turned their horses and rode away, but Garrett knew they'd made enemies today. He also knew it had been necessary. He wouldn't be pushed around, and he wouldn't abandon Nascha. "You should not have done that," Nascha said quietly once the riders were out of sight. "They will make trouble for you now." Let them try, Garrett said. I meant every word I said. You belong here. Nascha looked up at him, her eyes shining with tears. I do not deserve you. Yes, you do, Garrett said firmly, and I don't deserve you either. But somehow we found each other, and I'm not giving that up without a fight. She wrapped her arms around his waist and pressed her face against his chest. Garrett held her close, silently vowing to protect her no matter what came. The summer passed more peacefully than Garrett had dared hope. There were no more confrontations with angry townspeople, though he noticed that when he went into San Angelo for supplies, some people went out of their way to avoid him. Others, however, offered quiet words of support. Sheriff Mitchell stopped by the ranch once to check on them and seemed satisfied that everything was above board. You know, people are saying you two are more than just friends, Mitchell said bluntly during that visit. Let them say what they want, Garrett replied. My intentions toward Nascha are honorable. Are they? Mitchell asked, raising an eyebrow. Because if you're thinking what I think you're thinking, you should know that there's no legal barrier to you two getting married. It might actually help settle some of the talk. The suggestion planted a seed in Garrett's mind that grew stronger with each passing day. Marriage. The idea felt right in a way that surprised him. He'd never thought much about settling down before, had always assumed he'd live out his days as a bachelor. But Nascha had changed everything. He waited until a warm August evening, when they were sitting on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Nascha was mending one of his shirts, her fingers moving deftly with the needle, and Garrett watched her with a sense of contentment that went bone deep. Nascha, he said, and she looked up with a smile. Yes, he took a deep breath, suddenly nervous. We've been together for 6 months now, living in the same house, sharing our lives. People talk about it, speculate about what we are to each other. Her smile faded slightly. This troubles you? No, not the way you think, Garrett said quickly. I don't care what people say, but I do care about making things right, about doing this properly. He slid off his chair and knelt in front of her, taking her hands in his. Nascha Valdez, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Her eyes went wide with shock. You want to marry me? More than anything, Garrett said. I love you, Nascha. I think I've loved you since the moment I pulled you out of that snow. I want to spend the rest of my life with you if you'll have me. Tears spilled down her cheeks, but she was smiling through them. I love you too, Garrett. Yes, I will marry you. Garrett surged up and kissed her, pouring all his love and joy into it. When they broke apart, both were laughing. We will have to find a preacher willing to marry us, Nascha said practically. Not all will agree. Then we'll find one who will, Garrett said, even if we have to ride to the next territory. As it turned out, the local preacher in San Angelo, a surprisingly progressive man named Reverend Thomas, agreed to perform the ceremony. Love is love, he said simply when Garrett approached him. And God doesn't discriminate. If you two want to pledge your lives to each other, I'll be honored to officiate. They were married on a crisp September morning, with Sheriff Mitchell and his wife serving as witnesses. Nascha wore a simple blue dress that Garrett had bought for her in town, and she'd woven wildflowers into her long dark hair. Garrett wore his best clothes, his hair neatly combed, his face clean shaven. The ceremony was brief but meaningful. When Reverend Thomas pronounced them husband and wife, Garrett kissed Nascha with all the love in his heart. The few townspeople who'd gathered to watch clapped politely, and Garrett chose to take that as a good sign. That night, in the privacy of their home, they truly became husband and wife in every sense. Garrett was gentle and patient, and Nascha responded with a passion that matched his own. Afterward, as they lay tangled together in the darkness, Nascha traced patterns on his chest with her fingers. I never thought I could be this happy again, she murmured. After I lose my family, I think I will never smile, never laugh, never love. But you proved me wrong. You brought light back into my life too, Garrett said, pressing a kiss to her forehead. We saved each other, I think. The first year of their marriage was both challenging and rewarding. Garrett expanded the ranch, buying more cattle and horses. Nascha proved to be an excellent partner in every way, working alongside him from dawn to dusk. She had a natural way with the horses that amazed him, able to gentle even the most skittish animals with patience and soft words. They also faced their share of difficulties. Some of the neighboring ranchers remained hostile, refusing to do business with Garrett because of his choice of wife. There were a few tense incidents, including one where someone shot at their cattle, though nothing was ever proven. But there were also allies, people who accepted Nascha and treated her with respect. Slowly, grudgingly, the community began to adjust to their presence. It helped that Nascha went out of her way to be a good neighbor, bringing food to families in need, helping with difficult births among the livestock, sharing her knowledge of herbal remedies when people fell ill. Her quiet kindness won over even some of the most skeptical. In the spring of their second year together, Nascha came to Garrett with news that made his heart soar. "I am with child," she said, her hand resting on her still flat belly. "We will have a baby before the winter comes." Garrett whooped with joy, picking her up and spinning her around until she laughingly begged him to stop. "We're going to be parents," he said, wonder in his voice. "I'm going to be a father." "And I will be a mother," Nascha said, her own voice full of awe and a hint of fear. "I hope I will be a good mother like my own was." "You'll be wonderful," Garrett assured her. "I have no doubt about that." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Nascha remained active almost until the end, insisting that Apache women worked right up until their time came. Garrett worried, of course, but he also trusted her to know her own body and limitations. Their son was born on a cold December night, 3.5 years after that fateful day when Garrett had found Nascha freezing in the snow. The birth was long and difficult, and Garrett paced the floor in an agony of worry until he heard the baby's first cry. When the midwife, a kind woman from a neighboring ranch, finally led him into the bedroom, he found Nascha exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a soft blanket. "Meet your son," she said softly. Garrett approached on shaky legs and looked down at the baby's face. He had Nascha's dark hair and what looked like it might become Garrett's blue eyes. He was perfect. "What should we name him?" Garrett asked, unable to tear his gaze away from his son. "I was thinking we could honor both our heritages," Nascha said. "Give him a Apache name and English name. I thought maybe Samuel for English after your father." "Samuel," Garrett repeated, testing the name. "I like it. And for the Apache name, Nalnish," Nascha said. "It means he works." "I hope he will grow to be a hard worker like his father." "Samuel Nalnish Zimmerman," Garrett said, running a gentle finger down his son's soft cheek. "Welcome to the world, little one." The years that followed were the happiest of Garrett's life. Samuel grew into a sturdy, cheerful boy who seemed to inherit the best qualities of both his parents. Nascha proved to be as loving and devoted a mother as Garrett had known she would be, while also continuing to be his partner in every aspect of ranch life. When Samuel was 2, Nascha gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl. They named the boy Thomas after Reverend Thomas who had married them, and the girl Nora, a name Nascha had simply liked the sound of. The twins were a handful, keeping both parents busy from morning until night, but their home was filled with laughter and love. By the time the 4th winter after their marriage arrived, the same amount of time that had passed since Garrett had found Nascha in the snow, their family felt complete. They had 3 healthy children, a prospering ranch, and a community that had finally, for the most part, accepted them. One evening in late February, almost exactly 4 years to the day after that fateful rescue, Garrett and Nascha stood on their porch watching the sun set. The children were inside. Samuel supposed to be watching his younger siblings but probably getting into some mischief instead, based on the giggles emanating from the house. "You remember the first time we stood here together?" Garrett asked, his arm around Nasha's waist. "I remember everything," Nascha said, leaning into him. "I remember being so scared, so alone. I remember thinking I wanted to die, that I had nothing left to live for, and then you found me." "Best day of my life," Garrett said, "even though I didn't know it at the time." "Mine too," Nascha agreed. "Sometimes I think about what would have happened if you had ridden a different path that night, if you had not seen me in the snow." "Don't think about that," Garrett said, pulling her closer. "You're here and you're mine, and that's all that matters." "4 winters," Nascha murmured. "4 winters since you saved my life, and now look at us. A family, a home, a future. It is more than I ever dreamed possible." "It's everything I never knew I wanted," Garrett said. "You, the children, this life we've built together. I wouldn't change a single thing." A loud crash from inside the house, followed by Samuel's panicked voice calling for them, interrupted the tender moment. They hurried inside to find that the twins had somehow pulled down a shelf, scattering its contents across the floor. Thankfully, no one was hurt, just startled. As they cleaned up the mess together, Samuel helping while the twins toddled around getting in the way, Garrett caught Nasha's eye and they shared a smile. This was their life now, chaotic and messy and absolutely perfect. The following years brought their share of challenges. There was the drought of 1882 that nearly wiped them out, saved only by Nasha's knowledge of where to find water in the arid landscape. There was the winter when Thomas came down with pneumonia, and they'd fought for days to keep him alive, Nascha never leaving his bedside until the fever finally broke. There were still occasional incidents of prejudice, though these became increasingly rare as the children grew, and people saw them as individuals rather than just that Apache woman's kids. But there were far more joys than sorrows. Samuel's first successful ride on a horse by himself. The twins' first day of school, when the new teacher, a progressive woman from back east, welcomed them warmly. The birth of their 4th child, another daughter they named Violet, when Nascha was 32 and Garrett was 42. Garrett watched his children grow with a sense of pride and wonder. Samuel inherited his father's love of ranching and his mother's skill with horses, becoming an exceptional horseman by the time he was 12. Thomas was quieter, preferring books to cattle, and Garrett encouraged his intellectual pursuits even as he taught him the practical skills needed to survive on a ranch. Nora was fierce and independent, insisting on learning to shoot and ride as well as any boy. And little Violet seemed to be a perfect blend of all of them, curious and kind and brave. Nascha taught all the children about their Apache heritage, telling them stories of their grandparents and the old ways. She taught them respect for the land, for animals, for all living things. She also made sure they understood the prejudice they might face because of their mixed heritage and how to hold their heads high in the face of it. "You are who you are," she would tell them. "Apache and white, both bloodlines running strong in your veins. Be proud of both. Let no one make you feel shame for being born." Garrett backed her up completely, making sure his children knew that their mother was the strongest, bravest, most wonderful woman he'd ever known. He wanted them to see Nascha the way he saw her, not through the lens of prejudice, but as the remarkable person she truly was. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Garrett surprised Nascha with a trip to the territorial capital. It was the farthest she'd ever been from the ranch since he'd brought her home that frozen night a decade earlier. They spent 3 days in the city, seeing the sights, eating at restaurants and staying in a real hotel. On their last night there, as they sat in a nice restaurant over dinner, Nascha reached across the table and took Garrett's hand. "Thank you," she said. "For what? The trip?" "For everything," Nascha said, her eyes shining. "For saving my life that night. For giving me a home, a family, a reason to keep living. For loving me even when it would have been easier not to. For giving me these 10 years of happiness." Garrett felt his throat tighten with emotion. "Nascha, you don't need to thank me for any of that. Loving you has never been hard. It's the easiest thing I've ever done." "Still, I want you to know how much it means," Nascha said. "How much you mean? I think of that girl I was, broken and lost in the snow, and I hardly recognize her. You gave me back myself. You gave me a future." "We gave each other a future," Garrett corrected gently. "I was just as lost as you were in my own way, just as alone. We found each other and we built something beautiful together." They raised their glasses in a toast to the past 10 years and to all the years still to come. The children continued to grow and thrive. Samuel, at 17, had grown into a fine young man, tall and strong like his father but with his mother's dark coloring. He'd taken over more and more of the ranch work, allowing Garrett to slow down a bit as he entered his 50s. Thomas, at 15, had announced his intention to become a doctor, inspired by watching his mother heal people with her herbs and remedies. Garrett and Nascha were fully supportive, already saving money to send him to medical school back east when the time came. Nora, also 15 and Thomas's twin, had her own dreams. She wanted to start a horse breeding program, using her mother's techniques to raise the finest horses in the territory. She'd already started small, with 2 mares and a promising stallion, and was making a name for herself among the local ranchers. And Violet, at 8, was still young enough that her dreams changed weekly. But she approached everything she did with such enthusiasm and joy that Garrett knew she'd be successful at whatever she eventually chose. One spring evening, when Garrett was 52 and Nascha was 42, they sat on the porch watching their children work with the horses in the corral. Samuel was teaching Violet to rope, his patience with his little sister evident in every gentle correction. Thomas was reading under a tree, his nose buried in a medical text that had arrived in the mail last week. And Nora was putting one of her young horses through its paces, her face glowing with pride as the animal performed perfectly. "Did you ever imagine this?" Nascha asked softly. "All those years ago when you pulled me from the snow?" "No," Garrett admitted. "I had no idea what I was starting that night. I just knew I couldn't leave you there to die." "And now look," Nascha said, gesturing to the scene before them. "4 beautiful children. A home filled with love and laughter. A good life." "The best life," Garrett agreed. Nascha was quiet for a moment, then said, "Sometimes I still dream about that night, about the cold, the fear, the certainty that I was going to die. And then I wake up and you are beside me, and our children are sleeping safely in their beds, and I am overwhelmed with gratitude." Garrett pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. "You never have to be afraid again. I've got you. I'll always have you." "I know," Nascha said, her hand finding his and squeezing tight. "And I have you too. My husband, my love, my rescuer, my friend. Everything I need, all in one stubborn, wonderful man." Garrett laughed. "Stubborn am I, very stubborn," Nascha confirmed with a smile. "It is one of the things I love most about you. You do not give up, not on your ranch, not on your family, not on me. Even when easier paths present themselves, you stay true." "There's no other path I'd rather be on," Garrett said honestly. "This life, with you and our children, is beyond anything I ever hoped for." As the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and red, their children came back to the house, tired and happy from their day's work. The family gathered around the dinner table, sharing food and conversation, teasing and laughing. This was their nightly ritual, this coming together as a family, and it never failed to fill Garrett with a profound sense of peace. After dinner, after the children had gone to bed, Garrett and Nascha returned to the porch. It was their time, these quiet evening hours, when they could simply be together without the demands of ranch life or child rearing pulling them in different directions. "Tell me again," Nascha said, snuggling into Garrett's side. "Tell me the story of how we met." Garrett smiled. She asked him this periodically, wanting to hear him recount that fateful night. He suspected it was her way of reminding herself how far they'd come, how much they'd overcome. "It was February 1878, Garrett began, his voice taking on the cadence of a storyteller. "The worst blizzard anyone had seen in years. I was riding home from checking on a neighboring ranch and I almost didn't see you, just a dark shape against the snow. At first I thought you were a wounded animal, maybe a deer. But when I got closer, I saw you were a person, a young woman, barely more than a girl really." "I was 20, Nascha interjected. "Not so young." "Younger than your years, though," Garrett continued, "because of all you'd lost. Anyway, I checked for a pulse, found one, and knew I had to get you somewhere warm fast. So I put you on my horse and brought you here." "And you saved my life," Nascha said softly. "And you saved mine right back," Garrett countered, "just in a different way. You brought love and laughter and purpose into a life that had been missing all three." "4 winters," Nascha murmured. "That is how long it took for me to go from that broken girl in the snow to your wife. 4 winters of healing, of learning to trust again, of falling in love." "Best 4 winters of my life," Garrett said. "Well, those and all the ones that came after." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, each lost in their own thoughts. Garrett found himself reflecting on how much had changed since that night. The ranch had grown from a small homestead to a thriving operation. The children had been born and raised. He and Nascha had built a marriage based on mutual respect, deep love, and unwavering partnership. There had been hardships, certainly. The prejudice they'd faced, the whispers and sometimes outright hostility, the financial struggles of keeping a ranch running, the normal challenges of raising children and maintaining a household. But through it all, they'd had each other. "What are you thinking about?" Nascha asked, tilting her head to look up at him. "Just how lucky I am," Garrett said. "How blessed. I could have taken a different route home that night. I could have missed you in the storm. I could have decided it was too risky to stop. So many things could have gone differently." "But they did not," Nascha said firmly. "The spirits guided you to me just as I always believed. It was meant to be, Garrett. You and me, this life, our children. All of it was written in the stars long before that night." Garrett wasn't sure he believed in destiny the way Nascha did, but he couldn't deny that their meeting and everything that followed felt somehow fated. What were the odds of finding each other in that vast, frozen landscape? Of building a life together despite all the obstacles in their path? It seemed like more than just luck or coincidence. "Maybe you're right," he conceded. "Maybe it was meant to be." Nascha smiled, satisfied, and settled back against him. They stayed that way until the stars came out in full force, scattered across the night sky like diamonds on black velvet. The years continued to pass, bringing changes both expected and unexpected. Samuel married at 21, choosing a sweet girl named Mary from a neighboring ranch. They built a house on the far end of Garrett and Nascha's property and started their own family, giving Garrett and Nascha their first grandchildren. Thomas went off to medical school as planned, but he came home every summer to practice what he was learning and to reconnect with his family. He was courting a young woman he'd met at school, a teacher named Elizabeth, and Nascha suspected an engagement wasn't far off. Nora had become one of the most respected horse breeders in the territory, her stock sought after by ranchers and cavalry officers alike. She ran her business with fierce independence, insisting she didn't need a husband to be successful, though Garrett noticed she'd softened a bit toward the young banker's son who'd been courting her for the past year. And Violet, now a lovely young woman of 18, was teaching at the local school and loving every minute of it. She had a gift for working with children, a patience and understanding that reminded Garrett of her mother. Garrett was in his early 60s now, his hair more gray than brown, his face deeply lined by years of sun and wind. His back ached some mornings, and he couldn't work quite as hard or as long as he used to. But he was healthy and happy, surrounded by family, still deeply in love with his wife. Nascha, in her 50s, remained as beautiful to him as she'd been that first day. There was silver threading through her dark hair now, and fine lines around her eyes, but her spirit was unchanged. She still worked alongside him on the ranch, still tended her garden and her remedies, still filled their home with warmth and love. One winter evening, as they celebrated their 20th wedding anniversary with their children and grandchildren gathered around them, Garrett stood and raised his glass. The room fell quiet as everyone turned to listen. 20 years ago, he began, I married the most remarkable woman I'd ever met, and every day since then has been a gift. Nascha, you are my heart, my soul, my everything. You made me a husband, a father, a grandfather. You gave me a family and a home filled with more love than I knew was possible. I don't have the words to tell you what you mean to me, but I want you to know that I thank God every day for guiding me down that snowy path 22 years ago, for letting me find you, for giving me the privilege of being your husband. Tears streamed down Nascha's face as she stood and crossed to him. And I thank the spirits every day for bringing me to you, she said, for giving me a second chance at life, at love, at happiness. You are my everything too, Garrett, my rescuer, my protector, my partner, my love. These 20 years have been the greatest blessing of my life. They kissed while their family applauded and cheered. Samuel stood and offered his own toast. Then Thomas and Nora and Violet each added their own words of love and appreciation for their parents. The evening stretched on, filled with laughter and storytelling, with good food and good company. Later, after everyone had gone home and the house was quiet once more, Garrett and Nascha lay in bed together, hands clasped between them. 20 years, Nascha murmured. It seems like forever and no time at all. I know what you mean, Garrett said. I can still remember exactly how you looked that first morning when you woke up here, so scared and lost. And now look at you, strong and confident, surrounded by children and grandchildren who adore you. I remember how you looked too, Nascha said. Like an angel sent to save me. I was so confused, so unsure whether to trust you. And then you showed me nothing but kindness, and slowly my heart opened again. Best decision you ever made, trusting me, Garrett teased gently. Best decision we both made, choosing each other, Nascha corrected. Choosing love over fear, hope over despair, togetherness over loneliness. I'd choose you again, Garrett said seriously. Every time in every life I'd choose you. And I you, Nascha whispered. They fell asleep like that, hands still clasped, hearts still entwined, just as they'd been for the past 20 years. More years passed, and Garrett and Nascha settled into the comfortable rhythms of grandparenthood. They reduced their workload on the ranch, turning more and more over to Samuel and his family. They spent their days tending Nascha's expanded garden, where she now grew not just vegetables but a vast array of medicinal herbs that she used to help anyone in the community who needed healing. Thomas had indeed married Elizabeth, and they'd settled in a nearby town where Thomas practiced medicine. He often consulted with his mother on difficult cases, valuing her extensive knowledge of natural remedies. Between them, they'd saved countless lives. Nora had surprised everyone by falling head over heels for that banker's son, James, and they'd married in a beautiful ceremony when she was 25. They ran the horse breeding operation together, along with a small bank branch that James had opened in San Angelo. Nora had just announced that she was expecting their first child, and Nascha was beside herself with joy. Violet had married her childhood sweetheart, a kind young rancher named William, and they were already the parents of two energetic boys who kept everyone on their toes. Garrett, now 70, moved a bit slower and tired a bit easier, but he was content in a way he'd never imagined possible. His family had grown to include 4 married children, 9 grandchildren with more on the way, and a community that had long since accepted them as valued members. One evening in late February, Garrett and Nascha took a ride out to the place where he'd found her all those years ago. It had become a tradition of sorts, this annual pilgrimage to the spot that had changed both their lives. They stood together in the fading light, Nascha's head resting on Garrett's shoulder, both of them remembering. 26 years, Nascha said softly. 26 years since you found me in the snow. And 24 years since you became my wife, Garrett added. Best 24 years of my life. And mine, Nascha agreed. She turned to face him, taking both his hands in hers. I want you to know something, Garrett. I want you to know that even if I had known everything that would happen, all the struggles we would face, all the prejudice and hardship, I would still choose this life. I would still choose you. Every single time. I feel the same way, Garrett said, his voice rough with emotion. Every joy, every sorrow, every challenge we've overcome together, it's all been worth it. You were worth it. Our family was worth it. This life we've built was worth every single struggle. They kissed, the love between them as strong and vital as it had been in those early days, perhaps even stronger for having weathered so many storms together. As they rode back to the ranch, Garrett reflected on how far they'd come. From that desperate night when he'd pulled a freezing, traumatized girl from the snow, to this moment, riding beside his beloved wife of more than 2 decades, their grown children thriving, their grandchildren healthy and happy. It was more than he'd ever dreamed of, more than he'd ever dared hope for. The house came into view, warm light spilling from its windows. Samuel's house stood nearby, and beyond it, the barn and corrals where Nora's prized horses moved about. This was their legacy, Garrett thought. This ranch, this family, this love that had started with a simple act of compassion on a frozen winter night. That night, Nascha cooked one of Garrett's favorite meals, and they ate together at the table where they'd shared thousands of meals over the years. Afterward, they sat on the porch despite the chill in the air, wrapped in blankets, watching the stars come out. You have any regrets? Nascha asked suddenly. Any roads not taken that you wish you'd explored? Garrett considered the question seriously before answering. No, he said finally. I've lived exactly the life I was meant to live. Every choice I made, every path I took led me to you and to this family. How could I regret any of that, even the hard times? Nascha pressed. The people who treated us poorly, who made things difficult because of who we are. Even those, Garrett confirmed, because they taught us resilience. They showed our children how to stand up for what's right, how to love in the face of hate. Those struggles made us stronger, made our love deeper, so no, I don't regret them. Nascha smiled, a slow, satisfied smile. Good. Because I do not regret them either. Every moment, good and bad, brought us to here to now, and I would not change a single thing. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, each lost in memories and gratitude. Finally, as the cold began to seep through even their warm blankets, they went inside. In bed, Garrett pulled Nascha close, spooning around her the way they'd slept for over 2 decades. "I love you," he murmured into her hair, "more than words can express." "And I love you," Nascha replied, lacing her fingers with his where they rested over her heart. "Forever and always, my rescuer, my husband, my love." The years that followed were peaceful and happy. Garrett and Nascha watched their grandchildren grow, celebrated the births of great-grandchildren, and enjoyed the simple pleasures of a life well lived. They took walks together every evening when weather permitted, tended the garden, received visits from their ever-expanding family, and cherished each moment they had together. When Garrett turned 75, the whole family gathered for a massive celebration. There were over 40 people present, all connected to Garrett and Nascha through blood or marriage. As Garrett looked around at the faces of his children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, he was overwhelmed with gratitude. Nascha, now 65, stood beside him, still beautiful, still strong, still the center of his universe. She caught him looking at her and smiled, that same radiant smile that had captured his heart all those years ago. "What are you thinking?" she asked, slipping her hand into his. "That I'm the luckiest man alive," Garrett replied. "Look at all this, Nascha. Look at what we built together. 4 children, now all grown with families of their own. More grandchildren than I can count. Great-grandchildren running around. All because I happened to ride down a particular path one snowy night and found you." "All because you chose to stop," Nascha corrected. "You could have kept riding. You chose to help a stranger, and that choice changed everything." "Best choice I ever made," Garrett said, pulling her close and kissing her forehead. "You're the best thing that ever happened to me." The party continued late into the night, full of music and laughter and love. Samuel made a toast to his parents, thanking them for being examples of what true love and commitment looked like. Thomas spoke about the healing power of compassion, using his parents' story as the ultimate illustration. Nora talked about strength and resilience, qualities she'd learned from watching her mother overcome tragedy and prejudice. And Violet spoke simply but eloquently about love, about how her parents had shown her that real love wasn't about grand gestures, but about small daily acts of kindness and devotion. By the time everyone finally went home, Garrett was exhausted but happy. He and Nascha prepared for bed in companionable silence, both reflecting on the beautiful evening. 29 years, Nascha said as they climbed into bed. 29 years since that night in the snow. And here we are, surrounded by family, blessed beyond measure. "And still in love," Garrett added, pulling her close. "Still choosing each other every single day." "Always," Nascha promised, kissing him softly. "Forever and always." As they drifted off to sleep, Garrett's last thought was one of profound gratitude. His life had turned out better than any dream, better than any prayer. All because of a blizzard, a chance encounter, and the decision to help someone in need. All because of Nascha, his beloved wife, his heart, his home. The seasons continued their eternal cycle, and Garrett and Nascha moved through them together, hand in hand, heart to heart. They had been tested by life and found themselves more than equal to its challenges. They had loved deeply, lived fully, and created a legacy that would endure for generations. On a warm spring morning, shortly after their 30th wedding anniversary, Garrett and Nascha sat in their garden, surrounded by blooming flowers and the buzzing of bees. Nascha was showing their youngest great-grandchild, a precocious 3-year-old named Sarah, how to plant seeds. "You put them in the ground like this," Nascha explained patiently, demonstrating. Cover them gently with soil, give them water and sunlight, and they grow into beautiful flowers. Like magic, Sarah exclaimed, her eyes wide with wonder. Like love, Nascha corrected gently. You plant it, nurture it, care for it, and it grows into something beautiful. Garrett watched this exchange with a full heart. This was Nascha's gift, he thought. She could find the lesson, the meaning in everything. She could take something as simple as planting seeds and turn it into a profound truth about life and love. Sarah's mother, Samuel's daughter Rebecca, came to collect her. "Thank you for watching her, grandmother," she said, using the title that all the grandchildren and great-grandchildren called Nascha. "It is my pleasure," Nascha assured her. "She is learning well." After they'd gone, Garrett helped Nascha to her feet. They were both moving slower these days, their bodies showing the wear of 7.5 decades and 6.5 decades respectively of life. But they were still here, still together, still in love. They walked slowly back to the house, Garrett's arm around Nascha's waist, her head resting against his shoulder. This, Garrett thought, was what happiness looked like. Not grand adventures or exciting exploits, but simple moments of connection and love with the person who mattered most. That evening, as had become their custom, they sat on the porch and watched the sunset. It never got old, this daily ritual. Each sunset was unique, painting the sky in different combinations of colors, and each one was beautiful. "Tell me," Nascha said, as she often did during these quiet moments, "if you could go back and talk to that young man riding through the blizzard 32 years ago, what would you tell him?" Garrett smiled. They'd played this game before, but he never tired of it. "I'd tell him to pay attention, to trust his instincts, to stop when he sees that dark shape in the snow. I'd tell him that his life is about to change in ways he can't imagine, that he's about to meet the love of his life, that everything he's been searching for without knowing it is right there in the snow, waiting to be rescued." "And what would you tell the girl in the snow?" Nascha asked softly. "I'd tell her not to give up," Garrett said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'd tell her that even though she's lost everything, even though she thinks her life is over, she has so much to live for. I'd tell her about the man who's going to save her, about the 4 children she'll have, about the grandchildren and great-grandchildren who will fill her life with joy. I'd tell her that the best is yet to come." Nascha wiped at her eyes, tears sliding down her weathered cheeks. "That is beautiful, my love, and true. The best did come. It came in the form of you and our life together and this family we created." They sat in silence for a while, holding hands, watching the sky fade from orange to pink to purple to deep blue. Stars began to appear, one by one, until the sky was full of them. "You remember the first time we sat here and looked at the stars?" Garrett asked. "I remember everything," Nascha replied, which was what she always said, and Garrett believed her. Nascha had an incredible memory for the details of their life together, able to recall specific conversations and moments with perfect clarity. "You told me about Apache beliefs regarding the stars," Garrett said, remembering. "About how they were the campfires of ancestors watching over us." "And I still believe that," Nascha said. "I believe my mother and father, my little brother, they are up there watching, and they are happy, seeing how my life turned out, seeing the family I have created, the love I have known." "I hope my parents are up there too," Garrett said. "And I hope they're proud of the man I became, the life I lived." "They would be," Nascha assured him. "How could they not be? You are a good man, Garrett, the best man I have ever known." "Only because I had the best woman by my side," Garrett countered. "You made me better, Nascha. You made me want to be the kind of man worthy of your love." "And you succeeded," Nascha said, squeezing his hand. "Every day you succeed." As the night deepened around them, they finally went inside. Their bedtime routine was so familiar now that they could perform it without thinking. They moved around each other in perfect synchronization, a dance they'd perfected over 3 decades of marriage in bed. Garrett held Nascha close, listening to her breathe, feeling the steady beat of her heart against his chest. This was home, he thought. Not the house, not the land, but this woman in his arms. She was his home, his anchor, his everything. Garrett, Nascha's voice was soft in the darkness. Yes, love, thank you, she whispered. For everything. For finding me, for saving me, for loving me, for giving me this beautiful life. Thank you. No, thank you, Garrett replied, his voice rough with emotion. Thank you for being brave enough to trust me, for choosing to love me, for building this life with me. Thank you for every moment we've shared. We are both grateful then, Nascha said, and he could hear the smile in her voice. Both blessed, both lucky to have found each other. The luckiest, Garrett agreed. They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's arms, hearts beating in time. 2 souls who had found each other against all odds and had built a love that would last through the ages. The years continued to pass, gentle and kind. Garrett and Nascha's love story became somewhat legendary in the community. Young couples would sometimes come to them for advice, wanting to know the secret to a long and happy marriage. There's no secret, Garrett would always say. Just choose each other every day. Choose love over anger, forgiveness over resentment, togetherness over pride. And respect each other, Nascha would add. See each other as equals, as partners. Support each other's dreams, comfort each other's sorrows, celebrate each other's joys. Also, marry your best friend, Garrett would conclude with a smile, reaching for Nascha's hand. Because passion fades, beauty fades, but friendship endures. If you genuinely like the person you married, if you enjoy their company and value their opinions, you'll weather any storm. On their 35th wedding anniversary, the family threw another big celebration. Garrett was 80 now, Nascha 70. They moved slowly, their bodies showing the inevitable signs of age, but their minds remained sharp, and their love remained strong. During the party, Violet asked them to tell the story of how they met. It was a story the family never tired of hearing, one that had taken on almost mythical proportions with the retellings. Garrett and Nascha exchanged glances, then Nascha nodded for him to begin. It was February 1878, Garrett started, his voice still strong despite his age. The worst blizzard anyone had seen in years. I was riding home from checking on a sick neighbor, fighting through snow and wind, when I saw something dark against all that white. At first, I thought it was an animal, but something made me stop and check. The spirits guided him, Nascha interjected, as she always did at this point. They knew I needed help, knew he was a good man who would not turn away from someone in need. I found this beautiful young woman, half frozen, barely alive, Garrett continued. I brought her home, warmed her up, saved her life. Or at least I thought I was saving her. Turns out she was saving me right back. He gave me shelter, food, safety, Nascha said. But more than that, he gave me hope. He showed me kindness when I had seen only cruelty. He treated me with respect when others had treated me as less than human. He saw me, truly saw me, not as Apache or as woman or as victim, but as a person worthy of care and consideration. And I fell in love, Garrett said simply. How could I not? She was brave and strong and beautiful inside and out. 4 winters after I pulled her from that snow, she became my wife. Best decision I ever made. Best decision we both made, Nascha corrected, smiling at him with all the love in her heart shining in her eyes. The family applauded, many wiping away tears. It was a beautiful story, made even more beautiful by the evidence of its happy ending all around them. Garrett and Nascha's love had created all of this. 4 accomplished children, numerous grandchildren and great-grandchildren, a thriving ranch, a legacy of compassion and resilience. As the celebration wound down and people began to leave, Samuel pulled his parents aside. "I want you to know how grateful I am," he said, "for everything you taught me, everything you gave me. You showed me what real love looks like, what real strength looks like. You gave me the best possible example of how to live a good life." "You make us proud," Garrett said, gripping his son's shoulder. "You and your sisters and brother. Watching you all grow and thrive, that's been one of the greatest joys of my life." "Of both our lives," Nascha added, embracing Samuel. "You were our first, our oldest, and you have always made us proud. Not just with your accomplishments, but with the kind of man you have become. Good, strong, compassionate, just like your father." Samuel left with tears in his eyes, and then it was just Garrett and Nascha again, cleaning up after the party. They worked in comfortable silence, putting away food, washing dishes, straightening furniture. 35 years, Garrett marveled as they finished up. "Hard to believe it's been that long. And yet, in some ways, it feels like we have always been together," Nascha said. "Like there was never a time before us, before this life we built." "I know exactly what you mean," Garrett agreed. "My life before you seems like a dream now, hazy and distant. This is my real life. You, our children, our grandchildren. This is what's real and important." They prepared for bed, moving through their routine with the ease of long practice. In bed, Nascha rested her head on Garrett's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Garrett," she said softly, "when my time comes, when the spirits call me home, I want you to know that I died happy, that my life, from the moment you found me in that snow, was everything I could have hoped for and more." Garrett's arms tightened around her. "Don't talk like that. We have years left." "Maybe," Nascha allowed, "but maybe not. We are not young anymore, my love, and I want to make sure you know, while I still can, how grateful I am, how blessed I have felt every single day we have been together." "I know," Garrett whispered, his voice breaking. "I know, and I feel the same way, but I'm not ready to let you go. I'll never be ready for that." "Then we will just have to hold on as long as we can," Nascha said. "Hold on to each other, to this life, to this love, for as long as the spirits allow." They fell asleep holding each other tight, two souls intertwined, bound together by a love that had endured for over 3 decades, and would endure beyond even death. The seasons turned again and again. Garrett and Nascha celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary surrounded by an even larger family. They had lived to see great-great-grandchildren, tiny bundles of new life that carried their blood and their legacy forward into the future. Garrett was 85 now, Nascha 75. They spent most of their days in the house or the garden, their traveling days behind them. But they were content, happy to sit together in the sunshine, holding hands, watching their family come and go. One beautiful spring morning, 42 years after Garrett had found Nascha in the snow, they sat in the garden together. The flowers were in full bloom, the air was sweet with their fragrance, and the sun was warm on their aged faces. "This is perfect," Nascha said contentedly. "This moment right here is perfect." "Every moment with you has been perfect," Garrett said. "Even the hard ones, because we faced them together." Nascha turned to look at him, studying his face with eyes that had gazed at him with love for over 4 decades. His hair was completely white now, his face deeply lined, his hands gnarled with arthritis. But to her, he was still the handsome cowboy who had saved her life all those years ago. "I have loved you for 42 years, she said softly. 42 years since that night in the snow. And I will love you for eternity beyond that." "And I you," Garrett replied, lifting her hand to his lips and pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "You are my heart, Nascha. You always have been, you always will be. They sat together in the garden until the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant colors. Then, hand in hand, they walked slowly back to the house, supporting each other as they had done for so many years. That evening, surrounded by the evidence of their life together, the photos of children and grandchildren covering every surface, the home they had built with their own hands, Garrett and Nascha settled into their favorite chairs by the fire. "Read to me," Nascha requested, and Garrett picked up the book they had been working through together. His voice was a bit shaky now, his eyes not what they used to be, but he read to her as he had done countless times over the years. When he finished the chapter, Nascha was smiling peacefully, her eyes closed. "That was beautiful," she murmured. "Not as beautiful as you," Garrett replied, and she laughed, the same musical laugh that had charmed him all those years ago. "After all this time, you still say such sweet things." "After all this time, I still mean them," Garrett countered. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the fire crackling, the clock ticking, the house settling around them. This house that had started as a simple bachelor's cabin and had grown into a home filled with love and laughter and life. "Garrett," Nascha said eventually. "Yes, my love. No matter what comes, no matter how much time we have left, whether it is days or months or years, I want you to know that I would do it all again. Every moment, every challenge, every joy. I would choose you always." "And I would choose you," Garrett said, his voice thick with emotion. "In every life, in every world, I would find you and I would choose you. You are my soulmate, Nascha, my perfect match, the other half of my heart." They stayed up late that night, talking about their life, about their memories, about all the blessings they had shared. When they finally went to bed, they held each other close, two elderly people who loved each other as fiercely as they had when they were young. The years continued their gentle march forward. Garrett and Nascha aged gracefully, supported by their large, loving family. They celebrated their 45th wedding anniversary quietly, just the two of them and their children, a simple dinner filled with love and reminiscence. 47 years, Garrett said that night, counting from the rescue to the present. 47 years since I found you in the snow. It's been the greatest adventure of my life. And mine, Nascha agreed. Every single day with you has been a gift. They were 90 and 80 now, ancient by the standards of their time and place. But they were still here, still together, still in love. Their minds remained sharp even as their bodies grew increasingly frail. One quiet afternoon, as they sat together in the garden they had tended for so many years, Nascha turned to Garrett with a peaceful smile. "I think I am ready," she said softly. "Ready for what?" Garrett asked, though something in his heart already knew the answer. "Ready to rest," Nascha replied. "I am tired, my love. I have lived a long, full, beautiful life. I have been blessed beyond measure, but I am tired now and I am ready to go to my ancestors." Tears filled Garrett's eyes. "Not yet," he whispered. "Please, not yet." "I will fight as long as I can," Nascha promised. "But when the time comes, you must let me go. You must know that I am going happy, fulfilled, grateful for every moment we shared." Garrett gathered her into his arms, holding her as carefully as he had that first night when she had been so fragile. "I love you," he said. "I love you so much, Nascha." "And I love you," she replied, "forever and always." Nascha passed away peacefully in her sleep 3 nights later, with Garrett holding her hand. She was 80 years old and had lived 47 years beyond that frozen February night when she should have died. 47 bonus years filled with love and family and joy, all because a cowboy had chosen to stop and help a stranger in need. The funeral was attended by what seemed like half the territory. Nascha had touched so many lives with her kindness, her healing skills, her wisdom. People came from miles around to pay their respects, to tell stories about how she had helped them or taught them or inspired them. Garrett sat through it all in a daze of grief. His children surrounded him, supporting him, but there was a hollow place in his heart where Nascha had been. He had known this day would come eventually, had tried to prepare himself, but nothing could have prepared him for the reality of life without her. In the days and weeks that followed, Garrett found himself lost. For 45 years, Nascha had been his partner, his companion, his love. He didn't know how to be without her. He wandered through the house they had shared, seeing her everywhere, in every object, every room, every memory. Samuel and his family moved into the main house to care for Garrett, worried that he would simply give up without Nascha. And for a while it seemed like he might. He lost weight, lost interest in everything, seemed to be just waiting to join his beloved wife. But then, one morning, he woke with a strange sense of peace. He had dreamed of Nascha, vibrant and young and beautiful, and she had told him it wasn't his time yet. She had told him to live, to enjoy his family, to hold on to the memories they had created, but not to let grief destroy him. From that day on, Garrett began to heal. He would never stop missing Nascha, would never stop loving her, but he found a way to keep living. He spent his remaining days surrounded by family, telling stories about Nascha to his grandchildren and great-grandchildren, making sure her memory stayed alive. He spoke often of that February night in 1878 when he had found her, of how one moment of compassion had changed both their lives forever. He talked about their courtship, their marriage, the birth of their children, all the moments big and small that had made up their life together. "She was the love of my life," he would always say, "and I was blessed beyond measure to have her for as long as I did. 47 years. It wasn't enough, could never be enough, but it was 47 more years than she would have had if I hadn't stopped that night. 47 years of love and laughter and joy. That's something to be grateful for." Garrett lived for 3 more years after Nascha's passing. In that time, he watched more great-great-grandchildren be born, saw his legacy continue to grow and flourish. He made sure all the younger generations knew about Nascha, about her strength and courage and compassion. On a cold February morning, exactly 50 years after he had found Nascha in the snow, Garrett passed away peacefully in his sleep. He was 93 years old and had lived a life fuller and richer than he had ever imagined possible. His children found him with a smile on his face, and clutched in his hand was a piece of buckskin from the dress Nascha had been wearing that night he rescued her. He had kept it all these years, a tangible reminder of where their love story had begun. Garrett was buried next to Nascha in the family plot on the ranch. Their headstones stood side by side, just as they had stood side by side through life. On Garrett's stone, beneath his name and dates, his children had inscribed a simple phrase: "He stopped to help a stranger and found his soulmate." The ranch continued to thrive under Samuel's care, then his children's, then their children's. The story of Garrett and Nascha became a cherished family legend, told and retold through the generations. Their love story, which had begun with a blizzard and a rescue, had created a legacy that would endure for centuries to come. People in the area still talked about them, the cowboy and the Apache girl, whose love had defied convention and prejudice to create something beautiful and lasting. They talked about how Garrett had found Nascha freezing in the snow and had saved her life, and how 4 winters later she had become his beloved wife. But more than that, they talked about the life Garrett and Nascha had built together, about their 45 years of marriage marked by mutual respect, deep love, and unwavering partnership, about their 4 children who had grown up to be accomplished and compassionate adults, about the dozens of descendants who carried their blood and their values forward into the future. In the end, theirs was a story about the transformative power of compassion, about how one act of kindness can ripple outward to affect countless lives. It was a story about love conquering prejudice, about two people from different worlds finding common ground and building a life together. It was a story about resilience in the face of loss, about hope in the face of despair, about the strength that comes from choosing to love even when it would be easier not to. It was, quite simply, one of the most beautiful love stories the Wild West had ever known. And it all began on that frozen February night in 1878, when a cowboy named Garrett Zimmerman chose to stop and help a stranger in need, and in doing so, found the love of his life. Their story lived on in the hearts and memories of their descendants, a testament to the enduring power of love, the importance of compassion, and the beautiful truth that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected places. From a blizzard and a rescue, from loss and salvation, from two lonely souls finding each other against all odds. That was the legacy of Garrett and Nascha Zimmerman, the cowboy and the Apache girl whose love story became legend. And in that legacy, in the love they had shared and the family they had created, they achieved a kind of immortality. Their bodies might have returned to the earth, but their love lived on, eternal and unbreakable, a light shining through the generations, reminding everyone who heard their story that true love, real love, endures forever.